So let me see my notes. Okay. I'm going to talk about a few of my different favorite pre-writing activities. What is pre-writing? That aren't technically writing, but also feel like writing and actually help me a lot with making sure I'm putting myself in the zone to get some writing done. These are going to be different points from what I'm talking about in my previous video, which is what I'm doing when I'm not writing and trying to work through writer's block. This is when I'm actively writing and I'm trying to cultivate a sense of story, a sense of place, a sense of just that concrete, establish the story in my brain and give it roots. You know, it's like you snip, you propagate, you root it, you plant it. Being in the zone helps. It really does. We cannot deny that. So a few of my favorite ones. I have a few, so I hesitate to define it with a number. But for the title's sake, we'll say 5. I'll come up with 5. We'll do it. All right, so number 1. Music is really, really important for me for my process. I, was a pretty lazily dedicated musician when I was in school. I normally wouldn't even call myself a musician. I just said that for the drama, but I played cello from the age of 9 to the age of 18 and then on and off after that for a few years. But I do feel like studying music, making music in an ensemble gave me new appreciation and a deeper appreciation for music, especially classical music. And I feel like I can, I don't think it's special just to somebody who's studied music, but I really appreciate the motion and layers that go into music. And I find that when I think about them critically and think about them deeply, it follows a lot of the same processes as writing. Not only do I like listening to music recreationally, brings me to point number 2. I really like to create playlists. Summon or gather a bunch of songs that remind me of, not remind me, it's more about they're helping me cultivate a sense of mood and tone and place and character and helping define it concretely in my brain. As I'm brainstorming and coming up with characters, I want to feel immersed. And music just is like a little dash of salt that will help bring out all the flavors in my mind. It may open up new paths of character development that I hadn't considered. It may help me, figure out what the next step in the plot should be. It's just music has so many unlimited potentials to help open up the line of thought for writing. Music is actually part of my process. I know a lot of people prefer to write in complete silence, and sometimes I do too. Sometimes I like to connect with just the sounds that are around me, but sometimes it's important for me to also listen to music. And while I'm driving especially, I like to listen to music and imagine. When my sisters and I were younger, we used to put on an Enigma album, lie on the floor in the basement during the summertime, and just say, this is our imagining time. And we would just lie there and imagine stories. And then once the album or song or whatever was over, we'd sit up and say, what did you imagine? And we'd talk about the stories we came up with. So there's the listening of music and there's the cultivating of a playlist. And for me, the playlist usually has to follow the arc and shape of the story. So I kind of lame and cringe as hell, but I like to imagine it as a kind of movie score that if this were a film I were producing, which film is not a medium I ever have experimented with, and I probably won't. This is just me giving into my childish fancy when it comes to writing. I like to be immersed in the world. That's why I like to write. And I think it's okay to admit that, even though it's not sophisticated. With playlists, it's really important for me to have have songs that not only represent the characters, but also songs that speak to the shape of the narrative, speak to the setting, speak to the themes. Themes! I love themes. Themes are really important. I think playlists are helpful that way in establishing the narrative progression, the themes, the shape, just various things like that. Also, I'm not a very talented artist by any means, as you can see from the painting behind me. I really love drawing and painting though, so that's actually a really big part of my process. Even though I'm no good at it, I love it. It's so fun. Sometimes it's frustrating because I don't have the skills to do what I would like to do, but also I think I've come to understand I have my very rudimentary and childlike style. It works for me. Drawing is another one of those things that helps me develop a sense of place, develop a sense of character. I'm not somebody who likes to describe my characters in great detail. That's just a personal preference. Good or bad, who knows? I don't care. I just don't like to do it. I kind of think I trust my readers enough to develop their own sense of the character, and I don't want to be too controlling in that way. And I'm not putting down anybody who loves to describe like this shape of nose and this angle of jaw. It's just not my approach. Now I sound like an asshole because I made it seem like I hate that people do that. Yeah, so I think so then I also, obviously, journaling is really important. With my journal, when I'm pre-writing, this is where the concrete work is done, and I feel like it could be seen as the boring work, but obviously if you're immersed in it, it's not boring at all. Like normally I'm doing chapter maps and I like have a bullet point list that's really simple and it's written out in my handwriting, because this is like, pre-writing is what I do with my handwriting. I type my novel on the computer, and then pre-writing is all done in my notebooks. But basically I like to put lists of the overarching themes. So like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, or like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5, whatever. And then I like to break it down by chapter, what happens in this chapter. It took a while for me to learn that basic lesson of like, everything you write has to be in service of the narrative, and it has to work to get some kind of response out of your reader, because ultimately all you're trying to do is evoke a response in someone. And to a certain degree, you can try to control that response and aim for a certain feeling that you want to evoke, or a certain reaction that you want to get. People's lives have so much more context than we can control. So that means we often have to let go of our expectations of, what we can evoke. An important part of pre-writing is not just like burrowing in my hole for me. It's also like, I don't just hide myself away from the world. It's important for me to go out, be with my friends, have conversations about things that aren't necessarily writing, but also things that are about writing. And then hearing about like what they're up to, like any personal projects they're doing, any job hunting, or if they're working on an art project or doing their own writing. It's fun to like hear about that. And it doesn't even directly inform my book, but it's nice to just like be part of the world, because really, if you're not out there living your life, you have nothing to write about. Being part of the world will help you not only fertilize your life with new material to write about, but also keep you grounded and collect new experiences to write about. Go be in the world, observe things, go people watch, go laugh with your friends, listen to your friends. Ultimately, you are just putting words down on a page. That's all I'm doing, right? So that's my 5 things I do to get in the zone and do some pre-writing. I'd say, yeah, not much else. There are other things, but I don't want to waste anyone's time. And for me, this is just me getting excited about writing again, which is good. It feels healthy, feels organic, non-GMO. Not that there's anything really wrong with GMOs, but to a degree.